great to be back. There are so many things in our lives that I think transform us and change us and move us, and you might be in one of those right now. One of my most transforming events happened in 1985. I spent a little bit of time in prison, and at Florida State Penitentiary specifically. It was one of those things that happened where I learned a lot about human nature. One of the things that got me interested in human nature was spending time in prison. And I learned both good and bad about people while I was there in prison. I was there doing a documentary on capital punishment. So many of you are looking so concerned, like we had this guy in our midst the whole time, and who knew? He's a serial killer. Ah! So I was there in Florida State Penitentiary and doing a documentary on capital punishment at the time, and I met lots of people on death row, and it was a kind of an interesting, as you can imagine, very interesting time that gave me a lot of perspective on a lot of different things. It changed the trajectory of my life for a lot of reasons. But one of the most interesting things that I was met with was one man who was on death row, who was also in a twin study. On a twin study, they were looking for genomic, the gene kind of expression between twins, what behaviors were actually genetically endowed and which were not. And of course, where would you go but to look at identical twins? And so that was happening at the time, and this guy on death row had been there because he committed a particularly heinous crime, as you can imagine, a murder that you can imagine. And he was there, and he was asked a lot of different questions about why it is that he believed that he ended up at that space in his life. So they'd done lots and lots of different testing, but that question in particular was a very interesting question because of how he answered it. And he said, "I am here on death row," and that's easy to explain because of this. Me and my brother, we grew up with my daddy. He was a single father. He was a drug addict. He abused alcohol, and he abused us every single day. He would find us from the time that we were little. He would find us, and he would beat us. He would break bones. We were bloody. It was an everyday kind of thing. And what I learned was the only way to survive was to hit back. And eventually I became very violent, and this is what you get. That's how he explained his life. They went and they interviewed his brother as well, who is an investment banker. He might be a CA like Bonnie, but he's a, who knows? But he's an investment banker, and they asked him the same questions, and when they asked him the question, why is it that you believe that you ended up in the place that you're in your life, an identical twin? Where you are in your life, what was your answer? And he answered almost the same thing. He said, because growing up, me and my brother grew up with a single dad, abused drugs, alcohol, beat every single day, broken bones, bloody every single day. And then when we went to kindergarten, our first year of school, we were deemed too aggressive and too violent to be placed in the same school together because we would just beat up on kids all over the place. And so they pulled us apart and put us into different schools. And on one day, I was smashing this kid's face into the playground. And I was smashing his face as hard as I could when my teacher came upon me, and she went to go grab me. And I will never forget the look on her face. Ms. Greenow was her name, and she was so incredibly angry as she looked at me. And I looked at her like I would look at any adult going to grab me, as I am in a bad space where I was. And I did to her what I would do to any adult who would grab me, and that is I kicked her as hard as I possibly could. And I just kicked her leg and literally caused her shin to be bloody. And she was so angry, and she picked me up, and she pulled me in. And this guy, he kicked and kicked and kicked. She grabbed his legs, grabbed his arms, and she pulled him in, and she whispered into his ear. And she said, when we hurt, we don't hit, we hug. And every single day and every time that you feel angry and you feel mad, I want you to find me while you're at school, and I want you to find me, and I want you to come and hug me. And I want you to make it something that you do every single day. When you come into the classroom, the first thing I want you to do is come and hug me. And he did it again and again and again. And he at first got made fun of by his little kindergarten classmates. And then they began to become involved in this whole hug fest. And it became a hugging class. And this whole hugging thing began to happen. And over again, he grew to be quite a hugger. And he taught me one of the most important lessons that I have learned, and I hope that you learn from our little chat today, and that is this, is that you can't always be responsible for where you came from, but you absolutely have a choice about where you are going. We become who we are and who we practice and what we practice over and over and over again. We become that thing that we repeat over and over again, this miraculous thing that we actually talked about when we met a few months ago, and for some of you over a year ago. We have this amazing thing called the human brain that actually lets us make a choice about genetic expression. And it's interesting because aggression is actually a genetically endowed trait. And on one hand, one person decided to act on it, made the choice to go down one path and ended up on death row. The other guy makes a different choice and ends up as this hugger investment banker. Pretty amazing kind of thing, if you ask me. And so when we make choices, and the choices that you have before you today, and when you look at what you have facing you today, you have some big choices. And here's the thing. You have choices about how you interact with what's coming your way. You have some choices about what is change going to do to you, what change is going to do to not only your organization, but to you yourself. And so today what I want to give to you is a little bit of charge up around this idea that you do have choice. You have some really pretty big choice. The only blockade between you and that choice is you taking it, and you deciding to take it, and an awareness about the choices that you can actually make. And I think I told many of you when we first met that I believe that what we do is we make some pretty bad choices about our brain. We abuse it a whole heck of a lot. It's like having the Stradivarius violin that we bring up on stage and beat up, and then we expect it to play beautiful music. And yet we don't, because we sabotage our brains on a daily basis because we're not taking care of our brains. I believe that in the end, probably one of the most important things to remember as a human being and as the species that we are, one of the most miraculous things is that we are here and we do something that's exquisitely different than all of the other beasts on the planet, and that is we create significance for others. We create impact and significance for others. And when we make choices about our life that allow us to interact where we're not so freaked out and we're not so scared and we're not so busy focused on ourselves, we can actually do that quintessentially exquisite human thing by focusing on others and creating the significance that we can for others. And I actually think that is what Bon and the others, Marilyn and Kim, have talked about, is the whole idea that being a business partner, being someone that you partner with the people in your organization, that's about creating significance in their life. Because imagine the fear they have. Imagine the unanswered questions they have, and they might be looking to you for those unanswered questions, and you are going to maybe sit there and go, well, don't know yet. But here's the deal. Here is the thing. The significance that you can create in your organization, as well as other people's lives, as well as outside of Nexen, is really, really quite important, and I think is probably our mission on life. And so that's the mission we're going to go on. I think in order to get to significance, we have to focus on three things. I think we have to focus on managing the threats that are in our environment, and change is one of those. That feels very threatening to the brain, yeah? Managing the threats, finding some degree of control. And when you find that degree of control, you can calm down and finally offer to people some insight and some significance. And then getting to the place where that control allows you to have stamina, because you're going to be asked to go hard and far. How many of you feel like you are asked to do more now than you were a year ago? No, let me ask you this. I'll ask a different question, because many of you are just going to sit there. How many of you are being asked to do less than you were a year ago? Oh yeah, there's Yazid in the EPDP. Of course, he's being asked to do less. He told me about the EPDP kind of thing. I'm the EPDP, and then there were people at my table who were old, and they said there should be an OP EPDP, and old people EPDP. I'm like, oh, I don't even know what it is, but it sounds cool. So the thing that we want to do is we want to be able to run long and hard and charge into not only our work, but our life. And I want to remind you throughout our chat and our time together this one central theme, and that is this. Your brain goes with you wherever you go. It goes with you wherever you go. It doesn't matter whether you're at home or at work, at play. It goes with you. You don't have a work brain and a home brain and a play brain. you show up as a different facet of who you are, but your brain and the quality of it and the health of it shows up wherever you go. And so paying attention to that, I think, is so incredibly important to not only our longevity, but to your overall stamina and to that end goal of creating significance.